Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Ben here with Out of Frame. I just finished watching episode 2 of It, Welcome to Derry, and I have a full analysis breakdown for you so we can jump on in and see exactly what kind of thematic elements are starting to form here in episode 2. Plus, I have a couple of Easter eggs that I think are really cool that I want to share, and a couple of things that you may not have noticed that's really adding to the lore and mystery here of the show. So come on in, let's have a quick hang, and let's analyze episode 2 of It, Welcome to Derry. So my central feeling coming out of episode 2 is that the episode feels a little bit disjointed, kind of like a hodgepodge of different genres. So far, I'm tracking a high concept military intrigue. That's a whole Major Hanlon story arc that we're introduced to in this episode. I'm also sensing a pretty heavy-handed approach to the teen melodrama, specifically the Marge angle as she kind of navigates the intrigue that we're getting between her and Lily and the patty cakes, which they're called in the episode. And also, and most satisfying to me, the incredible horror set pieces that are coming through in this episode. So we have all of these different things coming together. I'm not exactly sure where we're going with them, but it does feel a little bit disjointed, at least coming out here of episode 2. So I'm already gonna coin a term, the Pennywise problem. The problem here is that I feel as though the show, even 2 episodes in, is already starting to string along the audience. Specifically, I thought at this point in the series that we would get more Pennywise. He's hinted pretty heavily, obviously, at the end of episode 1, and although we're getting it within different horror set pieces of the episode, we're missing that iconic Bill Skarsgård reveal as Pennywise. My other issue with the episode, if you want to call it an issue, is that I feel as though the show is kind of gambling with us as an audience. Not only are we missing Bill Skarsgård as the strong component, the Pennywise character who's going to be bringing all of these stories together, I think it's asking a lot of the audience 2 episodes into the show to have to invest in a completely new crop of characters. They did such a great job in episode 1 with the Losers Club 1.0. Here we are now at the start of episode 2, and we're having to introduce a whole new crop of characters, getting to know them. I don't think it was as effective, and it is a big gamble trying to keep us intrigued and invested in these characters without the main component, the main ingredient that we're all hoping for, which is that awesome reveal of Pennywise to kind of start tying everything together. One of the other things that I'm tracking is the theme of who the real villain is in the story. Obviously, Pennywise as the main antagonist, that goes without saying, but I really feel the show is starting to dig into the metaphor that Derry as a town is a stand-in for the state of the United States in general. Now, whether you're thinking it's the 1960s United States, modern day US, or just the history of the country within the last 60 years or so, I feel as though it's arguing that here the real evil is already all around us. Pennywise and the It entity itself really is just a stand-in as a mirror reflecting the ugly and horrific true nature of America, and that's kind of what I'm reading from the episode here so far. How are they showing this? Well, they're really leaning in and layering the real world evil on top of the supernatural elements. So we have the Cold War tensions that kind of run throughout the Air Force and Major Hanlon angle. This is obviously a response to the Cuban Missile Crisis of the 1960s, and we're also leaning pretty heavily into the racial divisions of the time, and this is everywhere, whether it's Will, Major Hanlon's son, getting bullied at the school, or whether it's the tensions at the Air Force Base, or whether it's Charlotte Hanlon, Major Hanlon's wife, walking through the town of Derry, getting groceries, seeing those boys beating up a kid outside of the meat shop. They're really leaning in pretty heavily into these themes, and I think that might be something that's going to continue to develop over the course of the series. A brand new element here in episode 2 is we finally get the show intro, which is really, really cool. But it actually reinforces the theme that I just mentioned, which is we start with this idyllic setting, Derry as the all-American town, and as the camera literally pulls back to reveal more and more layers of the town, we start to show the horrific setting that's underneath. And I know this is a theme from It, the actual novel by Stephen King, and the different ways that he shows the different phobias present in the 1980s at that point in the story, and again in the 50s when the kids are younger. But I didn't think the show was going to lean into that so heavily here. They have more time to develop those ideas, so it makes sense that you're going to pick a theme and kind of use that as your driving force narratively through the story. But I'm not sure exactly, if it's going to pay off at the end, because to me, the average person watching is just waiting to see Pennywise, and so far, he's not there. One of the best parts about the episode is that the Kingverse is exploding. That's right, Dick Halloran is here. Yeah, you got that right. The same Dick Halloran from The Shining. He's working with the Air Force and he's using his shine ability to be able to locate the secret buried weapon, which we know is going to end up being the It entity. So I really think it's cool that we're having this crossover. It's more than an Easter egg, it's a straight Kingverse crossover. And I'm really excited to see where this is going to go. And I think this is one of the standout parts of the show because it's a cool way to tie in multiple stories. There was even a mention of Shawshank coming up in a future episode, so I know the Kingverse is alive and well in this episode. Another great part about being able to tell a Pennywise It story is that we get to peel layer back within some of the family legacies within the town of Derry itself. So the show is building multiple bloodlines that if you're familiar with the movies and the book, you're gonna know and recognize. For example, Teddy, who was murdered at the end of episode 1, is confirmed to be Teddy Urris, which is a direct link to Stanley Urris from the It movies and the book, of course. So a distant relative, maybe a great uncle or something to that effect. But really cool that they're tying in that name. It was hinted at in episode 1 where it said Teddy Urine, blah, blah, blah. So they were already hinting that was something that you could decipher here in the episode 2. They totally acknowledge it. But not only that, the Bauer family legacy. So the police chief is currently Clint Bowers, who can only assume is Henry Bowers' grandfather later in the series of movies. To me, it's super cool because the way that they show the chief is he has a little bit of menace in him. He has a little bit of the ability to push buttons that maybe are a little unethical. So you can see within this family dynamic that bloodline kind of may already have that kind of nefarious, sinister element to it, which of course is fully embodied in Henry Bowers, which we know from the movie series. The next element I'm going to be focused on is analyzing a couple of the different plot developments here in episode 2. This one I'm going to be calling the Find Pennywise operation. So Major Hanlon was given a test. The men who had beat him up in episode 1 were plants. They framed Staff Sergeant Masters for being the person who was responsible for that beating of Major Hanlon in episode 1. And Major Hanlon has to prove, because that's just the man that he is, that this person was not responsible for that beating. And it proves that he's not afraid to go after the highest level within the military, even to exonerate a person that he doesn't get along with, which I think is fascinating. And when the general realizes this, he tells him in one of the most profound parts of the entire episode that he's been looking for a man just like him, a man with no fear. And that is so cool because it proves that the mission that the US Air Force is on is trying to find it and use it as a weapon. So we're introduced to the high concept narrative at this point, which is called Operation Precept, which is basically the US military trying to find this weapon and weaponize it against their enemies here in the Cold War. What kind of weapon is this? Well, we know it is a weapon that can make a person's worst fears come to life. And you can only imagine what the US government would do with that type of weapon, especially during this Cold War time, against their worst enemies. So let's get to the reason why we're all here. I think it goes without saying, we want some horror, right? We want those amazing horror set pieces that Andy Muschietti is so known for. And I think it's very interesting because we're 2 episodes into the series and already we've seen 2 live births on screen. The first in episode 1 of the angel of the demon baby, and then the second one, this amazing set piece with Ronnie and her deceased mom. So let me break it down for you, right? So what is Ronnie's nightmare built upon? Her fear. She has this deep pain of being the person responsible for her mom dying during childbirth. So what does Pennywise or It do? It uses that against her, right? She's trapped under the sheets during this haunting, I guess you could call it, and that turns into an amniotic sac. And then the climax of this entire sequence, she's birthed back into the real world by her deceased mom, which That sentence alone is just amazing. And then what does that deceased mom ghost character do? It blames her for her death, right? So the practical effects used in this entire sequence were on point. They looked really cool. They were really scary. This is 10 out of 10 horror, to say the least. And I think it's just interesting how we're using birth again as a motif in this horror set piece in episode 2, which leads me to believe that there might be something more here to this birth type of idea, this birth theme. So that's something we're going to keep our eye on to see if maybe, we tie that overarching narrative into this entire series, and somehow this is giving birth to something else later on in the story. So Ronnie's Nightmare as horror set piece number 1 in the episode was outstanding and a total home run. So let's go ahead and move on to the second horror set piece in the show that I think was done really, really well and very interesting. Lily is in a pickle, literally. So she's in the supermarket doing some shopping for her mom. She's just come off of being threatened by Clint Bowers, the chief of police, to give up Hatchet Hank, who is Ronnie's dad, as the killer in the movie theater from episode 1. So she's dealing with a lot of guilt as she's moving through the supermarket. Well, this guilt manifests in a terrorizing way. When she's walking through the supermarket, she kind of gets trapped inside of some of the supermarket aisles, and she just so happens to get trapped in the pickle aisle. And if you remember from episode 1, her dad was killed in an accident at the jar company, the pickle plant, if you will, and that's how she lost her dad. And in one of the coolest things that I've seen so far in the series, her dad's dismantled and mangled body shows up in the pickle jars. And then all of the different pickle jars, when they fall to the ground, I thought it was really cool the way they kind of morphed into kind of like an octopus style creature that then rushes over to Lily, who's freaking out on the floor. It has a tentacle wrapped around her neck and inside of her mouth, and the disjointed face of her dad kind of crawls up on her leg and wants a kiss and sticks out that disgusting tongue. This is what we came for, right? To me, in a 55-minute episode, we finally get to the point through these 2 different horror set pieces for why the majority of It fans are here. And this one here did not disappoint. My favorite line, just a kiss for daddy, as that tongue is kind of coming out towards her. Chilling stuff. This director here is just out of his mind when it comes to these different horror set pieces. If there was one analysis or one critique that I would humbly make to the director, is that we want more. But I guess I'm being greedy. It's only episode 2, so we're definitely going to see where this goes. But so far, that's another 10 out of 10 horror set piece. And unfortunately for Lily, it's the deal breaker for her as she now gets sent to the asylum, Juniper Hill, because she's losing it again, unfortunately. So the final verdict for episode 2, I'm going to give it a rating of a 7 out of 10. Still very high, salvaged in my eyes for sure by the 2 horror set pieces, brought down because of the teen melodrama, and right on point when it comes to the high concept military intrigue with the Air Force looking for the Pennywise entity as a secret weapon. So to me, the core problem here in episode 2, not for the series in general, is that it does feel like a little bit of a house of cards. We're building a lot of different genres on, in my opinion, kind of like a shaky foundation. I don't think the teen melodrama is working so far. I think the angle of Marge and the girls that she's friends with, the patty cakes, trying to befriend Lily, it just doesn't work for me. Then I have to invest myself into new characters, which include Mike Hanlon's son, Major Hanlon's son, Will, and then we're also introduced to a new friend of theirs. It seems like it's going to be asking a lot of me heading into episode 3. I do appreciate the big theme, though. I think it's intriguing if, in fact, we're trying to use the It entity as a mirror for the society that this story takes place in. I think it's fascinating, and I'm interested to see if they can keep it up. That, to me, is something that could flourish if done right. It also could flounder if it becomes a little bit heavy-handed or preachy. We're here for scares. We're not here necessarily for social commentary, at least from where I stand as a horror fan. But this kind of could go either way within the 2 facets there. The set pieces, the horror set pieces, are amazing. I think you may have liked them as well. If you agree, let's have a chat. I think it's really cool the way they pulled it off out of together. There's an interesting line where Lily is talking to Marge, and Marge is trying to convince Lily that she needs to kind of behave so that the patty cakes will be her friend. And then she says, who cares about the patty cakes? And to me, that's exactly what I thought. I was like, who cares about the patty cakes? That's not something that to me is that interesting. It doesn't feel as authentic as the movies. It doesn't read as clearly and effectively as the same character tropes we're dealing with in the novel. So hopefully that's something that maybe can be used as a springboard for more. And this was the main use of it in the series, because I don't think it's necessary going forward through the season. So do all of these disjointed pieces actually fit together? Right now, I'm not quite sure. This is a very ambitious story that's starting to develop, and I think it's going to depend whether or not the firm introduction of Pennywise into the series delivers the way that the audience wants it to. So what are your thoughts, right? This is a lot of me talking, and I'm interested to see about what you have to say. So feel free to drop a comment down there in the comments, and let's have a quick chat. Let's see what you thought about the set pieces. Is my analysis spot on, or am I drifting off into the light, and do we all float down here, right? So tell me what you think, friends. I'm happy to join you in a quick convo about this. Thank you for watching the video. We'll be back next week with episode 3's breakdown of It, Welcome to Derry, and I appreciate you hanging out. If you're down for some more analysis, check out this video right here. Let's keep the analysis train going. But for now, I'll go ahead and sign off. My name is Ben with Out of Frame, and we'll see you back here next week.